You may think you have the world's best passport, but chances are you don't. Even if you do have the world's best passport, just having one means you're constrained to one set of politicians, tax policies, one set of freedoms. You're giving one country control over your entire life. And now we're seeing countries that are imposing more regulations and more taxes on their own citizens, even when they move out of the country. That's why having two passports is so important, and today I'm going to tell you why you need to become a dual citizen. More than a decade ago, I started Nomad Capitalist as one of the earlier voices to say that Americans and other Westerners needed to have a second passport. That was a time when the people who offer citizenship by investment programs had no interest in targeting Americans, had no presence in the West at all. They were entirely focused on finding people in Lebanon, in Pakistan, in China, in emerging countries where people realized, hey, my passport's not that good. I would like a passport that allows me to travel better, allows me to go to business meetings, allows me to not have to get visas when I need to go and meet a potential customer. And then the pandemic happened. Then riots happened. Then political unrest and the social fabric breaking apart happened in many Western countries. And you're seeing Americans in particular, but also Canadians, Australians, Germans, Dutch, and others saying it isn't a great idea to be tied just to one country, because having a passport isn't just about where you can travel. Our annual Nomad Passport Index actually values citizenship. And so if your passport imposes restrictions on you if you want to leave the country, if they don't allow you to have dual citizenship, if they do other stuff that makes the passport less desirable, the number of countries you can visit is a bit of a supercilious number. And so what we've seen in the last few years is people who realized, hey, I never thought I would need a service like Nomad Capitalist, but now I'm seeing how I need a second passport. Now, I was watching this from being a relatively little kid. My father famously told me, go where you're treated best, because he would share information from various reports he would see in the Wall Street Journal. Oh, look, the U.S. economy fell another rank this year. And he said, this is going to get worse. They're going to tighten the screws. The West is going to become less relevant. It is going to become less free. It is going to become higher tax. And people like you, 12-year-old Andrew, who want to be entrepreneurs, are going to be less welcome here. I was planning on where I wanted to live overseas as young as 13 or 14 years old. And 30 years ago, shortly before I was doing those dinner table conversations with my family, there was a book called The Sovereign Individual, which talked about the idea of global arbitrage, and it talked about having dual citizenship. Back then, my family was kind of seen as crazy. My father was on the early days of the internet typing, hey, I'm thinking of moving to New Zealand. What does anyone think about that? Decades before billionaires were establishing their bunkers and getting second citizenship through their connections with the government and by making big investments. Nobody really thought the West would get worse, but we saw, and I really saw at an early age, that the trend of where the world is was moving back towards the East, and that having a Western citizenship would be more of a liability. Yes, you'll be able to travel. Yes, you'll be able to live in your country, but if you ever come to the point where your country taxes you too much, takes away too many of your freedoms, or just isn't as great of a place to live, you're going to have a harder time with that Western passport than you would if you had a non-Western passport. The bottom line, at a time when all the freedom scores, especially in countries like the United States, are plummeting, is a second passport offers potential tax savings if you are willing to move at some point, and in some cases, you may have to actually get rid of your current citizenship. I think that's a trend where the Western world is going to be going. The U.S. has citizenship-based taxation. Our average client saves 80-something% as an American, but they save closer to around 90% as a non-American. Not a big difference, and it's not worth giving up your citizenship for a few percentage points. But for some folks, they just don't want to be American. Now Australia is kind of sort of getting into the same game. Other countries have kind of dipped their toe or experimented with, well, what if we taxed our citizens no matter where they live? And so a second passport gives you the option to say, you know what? I don't need you anymore. It's kind of like that girl that wants to break up with you, but she wants to find some other guy first. It's also a plan B for emergencies. And so if you need to travel during COVID, the U.S. passport was on par with Rwanda. Other passports had their citizens grounded. Some countries didn't even issue their citizens passports. Hey, sorry, COVID, go away, nothing to see here. Meanwhile, I was renewing some of my passports in literally one day. And I've heard other friends of mine who live in the emerging world where their passports are being renewed in as little as 4 hours. You don't get that in some of the Western countries because they don't believe that they work for you. You just pay them, but they don't owe you anything. And it is disturbing to see politicians in the West say, Maybe we won't give you a passport if you don't do what we like. So having a plan B to be able to go somewhere else. Robert Kiyosaki, when he told us at Nomad Capitalist Live, 48 hours to be able to be somewhere else. It's going to be easier to have with having a second citizenship because a citizen is the highest level of access. Residence permit is next, potentially permanent resident if they have that, then a temporary resident, and then below that is tourist. During the pandemic, tourists were often not welcomed. Residents were often welcomed, permanent residents sometimes more so, and citizens come right in. We can't stop you unless we are Australia. They did stop their citizens, which is why their passport to me is much less valuable. Fine if you want to live in Australia. Fine if you're happy with whatever the government does to you. No problem with that. But if you want to go where you're treated best, it's going to be more difficult. A second passport, on a more happy note, allows you the ability to travel to more places. What I constantly tell people is, if you are a Westerner, you can first check your family tree. Is there someone from another country? Oftentimes that's a European country, and European Union passports are indeed some of the best travel passports in the world, and they also allow you to live in any of the European countries. And so what people often misunderstand is, what do I need a Polish citizenship for? I don't want to live in Poland. Polish citizens can live in Spain, Ireland, Switzerland, Italy, anywhere you want, really, in Europe. You can also travel as a citizen of that country, and so you might go through a faster line. You might be able to live there, but not have to live there. You may be able to retire there, send your kids to study there. There are countries in Europe that actually have great tax incentives, and so you could move there and actually save money on tax. Some people have ancestry from Latin American or Caribbean countries. Those aren't bad passports either. That's the first thing to check is, do I have the opportunity to get citizenship through my family tree? But beyond that, you want to look at other opportunities to get citizenship in countries that might be more far-flung. Being able to travel to more places means having a passport that's a little bit different. And so passports that are a little bit different, Ecuador, Uruguay, Armenia, Serbia, those are maybe some of the more accessible ones where you can get with a relatively short period of living there. Serbia is rolling out some new interesting programs potentially shortly. Armenians by descent. Those are passports that offer something a little bit different to what a Western passport may offer. And so if you're American or Canadian or Australian and you can get Greek citizenship, hey, that's cool. I'd probably do that. But understand those aren't that different from each other. I might throw in a third citizenship because I really believe 2 is 1, 1 is none, and 3 is where you need to be. And so having a third one that's kind of out in left field, as it were, a bit avant-garde, wouldn't be the worst idea. You know, I had a guy who was British. He was able to claim Irish through his family tree. Not a lot of difference other than now the Irish means he can live anywhere in the EU. And he was also able to claim through his wife Armenian citizenship. Like, all right, that's kind of a little bit different. Now you're opening up a different level of possibilities. China, Russia, Iran, probably not your favorite romantic vacation spots, but just the fact that they're a little bit differently aligned means you're going to have a little bit different experience if you need that. And also, the ability to have second citizenship means you can generally pass it down to future generations. Some of the Caribbean citizenship by investment programs don't allow that. But if you want to give future generations those same privileges, in most cases, you can do that. There's a few citizenship by descent that stop unless your child is born in the country, like the UK. And again, some of the Caribbean citizenship by investments don't pass down unless you pay, or unless you give birth in that country. That's a way to do it, citizenship by birth. So those are the benefits of having a second passport. Now, what we're seeing people now say, they want to live overseas, but they didn't have the level of optionality that they thought they would. So I was recently on a podcast hosted by Rick Rubin, the music impresario. And he said, I wanted to go and spend a bunch of time in Italy. And he said, I didn't realize I can't just go and move in, right? I mean, you turn on the TV, you watch all these different TV shows where people are just like, I'm moving to France. And I always think, how are they moving to France? Like you don't just show up and land like, hello, I'm an American, you have to let me stay. They're like, no, you get 90 days like everybody else. And so Americans and many others who have access to what's called the Schengen area, the borderless area that makes up pretty much all of continental Europe, you can spend 90 days out of every 190 days. You can spend 180 days in Mexico, but they can also say, yeah, you know what? You should only be here for a month, so we'll give you a month. You can spend 30 days in Thailand, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, you can kind of travel the world on perpetual visa runs. A lot of countries are cracking down on that. Why are you coming so often? We're not going to give you the full amount we're supposed to give you. This is not, again, a sitcom or Sex and the City or whatever. They're just moving somewhere. You have to have permission to live there. Now, you can get a residence permit, and if you live in a country long enough, you can get citizenship. But if you just want to jump to the citizenship, There's ways to do that as well, like what's called citizenship by investment programs, or again, the citizenship by descent, or Malta has a roughly $1 million program to get citizenship in the European Union, and then you can live anywhere you want. Those are the benefits. It is optionality. Residence permits are, I want to live somewhere. I want to live in Ireland. I'm going to start a company and hire myself in Ireland, and I'm going to live there and I'm going to work towards citizenship. But if you're just saying, I don't know what I'm going to want to do in the future and I want more options, that's a benefit of dual citizenship. And it could be, I just want to retire there, I want to send the kids to school there, or holy cow, this place is going to the birds, I got to find somewhere else to move, and I want to have that place ready to go. Here's what a friend of mine said. In national catastrophes, the most direct way to safety is to leave the danger zone. Whether facing war, famine, economic collapse, or totalitarian rule, the fastest solution on a personal level is geographical exit. I think a lot of problems that people don't know how to solve perfectly are solved by geography. Making a move in your geography, changing your surroundings. And so look at citizenship by descent, citizenship by investment, and if you really want to move somewhere now, by naturalization. But what a lot of Americans and Westerners are saying is, I want to stay in my country. Andrew, I like your 80 and 90% tax savings, but I'm not there yet. The kids are in high school. That's great. We can help you put together a portfolio of residence permits and passports that allow you to escape war, famine, economic collapse, totalitarian rule, because citizenship gives you the optionality. Once you have that, in most cases, not only is it passed down, but they're not going to take it away from you unless you lied, or unless in a few countries, you don't check in every once in a while, but that's pretty rare. And so if you decide while fleeing that war, or whatever else that you're doing, that you want to travel overseas, that second passport will help you stay there longer, right? We saw with Ukraine, for example, countries opened up to Ukraine. Some countries said, hey, Ukrainians can come, but after a certain amount of time, you got to figure out what you're doing. You got to get a residence permit, or you need to whatever. And so they allow people to come in temporarily, but long term, it's like, hey, here's the rules. And maybe some people couldn't meet those conditions. Those are some of the reasons to have second citizenship. I think that this idea is lost on many Westerners because the good times have conditioned us to believe that our country is exempt from what has happened in history. I know people who lived in prosperous economies 20 or 30 years ago, and then they experienced a fall. There are countries that built back up, but they had to go through some tough times. Being able to get themselves out of that geography was in some cases the best way to keep their fortunes intact, their families intact, keep themselves alive in some extreme cases. That's the power of second citizenship, is not having to go hat in hand when there's a problem. And if it's just everyday life, living, studying, retiring is a benefit. Traveling to more places is a benefit. Having more options, even lowering your taxes is a benefit. Those are the reasons why you want to have at least 2 passports. And I would argue today, you want to be looking more towards having 3. Not 2 of the same passport, but 2 different passports issued by 2 different countries of which you're a citizen. It's something that we help people do, building diverse passport portfolios.